Hi everyone and welcome to Algebra 2, Lesson 3.1. So this is where we begin Unit 3, which just kind of continues on from Unit 2, except now we're going to be specifically looking at parabolas and quadratic equations and their specific properties. So in Unit 2 we learned how to graph them, move it from standard from the vertex form, and just kind of get it visualized, find the range and domain, find the line of symmetry, find the vertex. So now we're just going to kind of expand on this. So the solutions to a quadratic equation, meaning the solutions to a quadratic equation are the points at which the function intersects. Well, in this case, the solutions or the answers are where it meets the x-axis. So they're also referred to as the zeros of the equation, the roots of the equation, and the x-intercepts of the equation. So now, you have three different options for how many solutions a quadratic equation has, or how many times it passes through the x-axis. You can have two solutions where it looks like this, where you see that it goes through twice. You can have one solution where it perfectly just touches the x-axis right there, or you could have no solutions where it never touches at all. These are no real solutions. So now, we're going to go ahead and we are going to graph this parabola. All right, now we could do it in different ways. Either A, we can use the negative b plus 2a, or we could, negative b divided by 2a, or we can go ahead and complete the square. I'm just going to go ahead and complete the square because that's what we've been doing last time. It's easy to graph that way. So I take 2 divided by 1 gets me 1. So now I know I have an x plus 1 squared, and 1 squared is just 1. So that means that I'm going to add a 1 on this side and minus a 1 on that side. So I have negative 2. I'm sorry, negative 3, negative 4. So there's my vertex, 1, negative 4. So right there. If I were to go ahead and do the whole thing, it would be like this. Minus 3 equals plus 1, right? This part becomes this, and then when I minus 1 and minus 1, I get this. So that is my vertex. So now we'll go ahead and we'll graph our parabola. So we know that our vertex is going to be negative 1, 4. Negative 1, negative 4. All right, and we are going to go ahead and graph this parabola. And the things that I'm looking for, honestly, is I need the zeros, right? So I need to know where y equals 0. But when we go ahead and we graph this, if I have this and I go, let's say negative 2 and a negative 3 and a 0 and a 1, I go ahead and pop it in. Negative 3 squared is 9. Plus negative 18 minus 3, right? So it's negative 9. That's 9. That is, not negative 18. Negative 6, so it's negative 3 minus 3 gets me negative 6. Right, negative 3 squared. Let me put it in a table so we can just do it normally. X squared plus 2x minus 3. So sometimes you just need to write it out because sometimes in your head it just doesn't work. So negative 3. So negative 3 squared plus 2 times negative 3 minus 3. Negative 3 squared is 9. 9 minus 6 is 3. And 3 minus 3 is 0. So that can be a 0. For negative 2, we're going to have a negative 2 squared, which is 4, plus 2 times negative 2, which is a negative 4, minus 3. So that'll get me a negative 3 when I'm done. So these will be negative 3's, and this will be 0. So now when I graph it, I have a negative 2, negative 3. So right there. And I have a negative 3, 0. And then I have a 0, negative 3, and a 1, 0. So this is what my parabola looks like. So the answers to my parabola are these points right here. So my answers are going to be x equals -3 and x equals 1. So the answers to your parabola, the solutions, those are the x's. Basically the x-axis. Okay? So now I just write in brackets where basically x equals, I don't know why it's disappearing. And we have a -3, 1. All right, so now let's go on to number 2. Number 2, same thing. All right, we can go ahead, we can factor out our not sure why this is disappearing like this, but we'll work with it. All right, so for number 2, we can go and do the same thing. We can go ahead and complete the square, right? You can factor out the negative sign. Let me reload this. All right, hopefully this works better now. All right. Yep, looks like it's working better. Okay, so we factor out the negative sign, which gives us x squared plus 10x minus 25. Right, when I cut 10 in half, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So now I have a negative x plus 5 squared. This squared, right, gets me 25. So on this side, it'll be negative 25. So when I add it over, it's just 0. So my graph is going to be 5, 0 is my -5, 0 is my vertex. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So right there. Right? So now I know that I have a -5, 0. So I can go ahead and erase this. Right? And now, the thing that I see right away is that this is my 0. There's only one of them. It's right in the center. Right? So let's get another couple of points here. Let's get a -6 and a -7 and a -4 and a -3. And when you go ahead and you pop them into here by substituting it in, you'll get a -1 and a -4. You get a -1 and a -4. So now I have -5, 0, -4, 1, -6, 1, -7, -1, -7, -4, and this -4. So my parabola will look like this, and you see that it only touches the axis right there. So that is one solution. So the answer for this is just x equals -5. All right, and then number 3 we'll tackle in class. All right. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to skip down, all right, to number 7. So number 7, let's go ahead and do this. I factor out my negative sign, giving me x squared minus 8x, right, minus 17. So when I do this, I have -8 divided by 2 is a -4. So I know that I'm going to have a negative x minus 4 squared. Right? Now, on this side, I have to put a positive 4 because the negative is going to affect that, making it positive. So that means I'm going to minus 4, so it's going to be -21. So that means that my vertex would be at -4, -21. So my vertex is at -4, Oops, not negative 4. Oops, I'm sorry. I forgot to square this. That is 16. So this would be a negative 16, right? So making this a positive 16 here makes this negative 1. So that is a negative 1. All right. So now my vertex is going to be 4, negative 1. So now that I have 4, negative 1, I'm right over here. Now the thing is, you notice that this parabola right here is negative. So that's going to be going down. So basically it's going to be doing this, right? So when I graph the rest of it, it's going to look like that. But notice it never touches the x. So this one is the no real solutions, where it never touches. All right, so that one is no real solutions. So basically, no real solutions. All right. Then we're going to move on to do some refreshing in factoring, okay? Because factoring is something that we did 2 years ago, so it was a while. So when you factor, basically you're dividing out the biggest number that everything that's there has in common. Right, so when we do that, when we see a 12 and an 18, we notice that they have 6 in common. That's the biggest number that goes into both of them. So basically, we're just going to divide both of these by 6. When I divide by 6, I get 2k minus 3. Now, I just have to account for my 6 that I divided by putting it in front. Because if I multiplied it back, I'm going to get this. So I multiply it, I get 12k, and I multiply that, I get negative 18. So when we factor, it looks like this. Number 2, right, we want to find the number that they have in common, the biggest one. So in this case, it's going to be 8, right, because 8 goes into 64 and 40. Then we look at the x's. Well, they both have an x. So the one that goes into the x is the x with the smallest power. So x to the 4th. And then they both have a y, so we can factor out a y to the first. Now, how does this work? When I divide these by 8, right, that gets me a 5, and that gets me a positive 8. Then, when I divide this by x to the 4th, this is just subtracting. 8 minus 4 is 4. So this will be x to the 4th. This one, x to the 4th, that goes away. The x's cancel out. Then when I divide by the y's cancel each other out. So all we're left with is 5x to the 4th plus 8. So it's 8x to the 4th y and 5x to the 4th plus 8. All right, let's go ahead and try this one. We have 14, 35, and 7. Right, what goes into all of them? Well, 7. Now we see we have an m to the 6th, m to the 3rd, m squared. So we're going to use the smallest one, which is m squared. So now we go ahead and start dividing. 14 divided by 7 is 2. M to the 6th divided by m squared is m to the 4th. Negative 35 divided by 7 is negative 5. M squared, right, m to the 3rd divided by m squared is just m to the 1st. And then negative 7 divided by 7 is a negative 1. And m squared divided by m squared cancel each other out. So that is your answer. We'll have you guys do number 4. All right, number 5, these are factoring trinomials. So this is where we talked about it real fast. You need to find two numbers that multiply to be 45. So in this case, think of it like 9 times 5 equals 45, but are the same sign and add together to be positive 14. So 9 plus 5 equals 14. So when we factor this, you have x plus 9, x plus 5. And if you FOILed it together, you would wind up with this answer. Number 6, same thing. Two numbers that multiply to be 26, but add together to be negative 15. So basically, this tells you that both signs are the same, and this tells you what the signs are. So both numbers are going to be negative, and they have to add together to be negative 15. So 2 times 13 is 26, and 2 plus 13 is 15. So that works out in our thing. So I'm going to go ahead and write my number W and W. I'm going to write a 2 and a 13, and this tells me they're the same, and this is what they are, negative. All right, let's try this one here. We need two numbers that multiply to be 48, but combine to be positive 2. So this tells me that both numbers are going to be different signs, and the biggest one is going to be positive. So when you think about 48, right, that's going to be 6 times 8 equals 48. And when I have a negative 8 plus a positive 6, that gets me, oops, the other way. When I have a positive 8 plus a negative 6, that equals positive 2. So basically, I don't even look at this too much. I just look at this. 6 times 8, C and C, and I see that they're different signs, and the biggest one is going to be positive. Positive, negative. All right? We'll work on those. Number 11, you notice that there's a 2 in front of here. So just like completing the square, we have to factor out this 2. So divide everything by 2. Right? And now we can factor this part. So two numbers that multiply to be 20, but add together to be negative 8. Right? So when you think about it, you can have 10 times 2 is 20. And then if you have 10 minus 2, that equals 8. Right? So basically, remember, when they're different, you're subtracting them. So now, 2 times, I have a K, a 10, and a 2. And the biggest one gets the negative sign. And that's how that's done. All right, now, this one here, 13, we're going to do something called bottoms up factoring. Because you see that I can't divide everything by 2 here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a technique where I go ahead and I multiply A times C. So number 1, multiply A times C. So that gives me 36. So 2 times 18 equals 36. So now I have x squared minus 15x plus 36. All right, step 2, factor. So I need two numbers that multiply to be 36 that are the same sign or negative 15. So 36 would be 6 times 6. You can also have 4 times 9. That's another one. You can have 2 times 18, which we just did. And we can also have um, 12 and 3. So 12 times 3. So 12 times 3 is 36, and 12 plus 3 is 15, so that works. So we can factor this right now into x and x, okay? And then it just tells us that the signs are the same and they're both negative. So negative, negative, 12, and 3. But we're not done. 3 divide by the original A. Right, A term. So remember how we multiplied by 2 over here? So now I have to divide by 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So this is x minus 6. Now, we agreed that 3 doesn't divide into 2. So the one that doesn't divide in evenly, that one just slides in front. 2x minus 3. And that's your answer. All right, let's try this one. All right, 5 times 48. So that's 240. 5 times 48. That's 240. So basically, I have p squared plus 22p minus 240. Right, now I need two things that multiply together, but subtract to be 22. So let's think about that, right? So what becomes 240? I have 24 times 10. Well, 24 minus 10, that's 14, so that doesn't work, right? So 240 could also be 30 times 8, which is 240. And 30 minus 8 equals 22. So that's going to be our numbers. So I go ahead and I have a p and a p. This tells me they're both different. And the biggest one is going to be positive. So 30 is the biggest one, so I have 30, and I have 8. So now I have to go ahead and divide by 5, because that's what I multiplied by. So p plus 6, and this 5 goes right in front, because 8 doesn't divide by 5. So 5p minus 8. All right, and then we'll try the other couple. Let's try one more. 3 times 40. So it's negative 120, right? So that is h squared minus 19h minus 120. So I need two things that multiply to be 120, but subtract to be negative 19 or 19, right? So we have 12 times 10. Well, that's 120, but that just gives me 2, right? We have 4 times 30 doesn't work. Let's see here. 4 times 30 does not work. 24 times 5. So 24 times 5 is 120. And 24 minus 5 equals 19. So that means I'm going to have an h and h. They're both going to be different. And the biggest one is going to be negative, so that's the 24. So now I have to go ahead and I have to divide by this 3 again. So 5 doesn't divide into 3. So that's going to be 3h plus 5. Over here, negative 24 divided by 3 is a negative 8. And that winds up being our answer. All right, we'll try the other ones together. All right, difference of squares. So difference of squares just says that when the first term is a perfect square, because that's x times x, right? And we agree that 4 is 2 times 2. And whenever you have a negative side, that's called the difference. So basically, this always breaks down into just x minus 2, x plus 2. Right? Y squared, that's a y and a y. Negative 81 is 9, right? The square root of that, negative 9, positive 9. Let's try this one. This is just 3x times 3x, so it's a 3x and a 3x. Negative 25, right? That's just going to be 5, and y to the fourth is 5y squared times 5y squared. So negative 5y squared, positive 5y squared. All right, and we'll go over the rest in class. So if you have any questions, let me know, and we will address it. All right.